Okay. Hi, everyone. You're on the NYC Taxi News podcast, and I have Dawood with me, along with Carolyn, and we're going to see if we could figure out how this world is working with the taxi business. All right. And in this podcast, we're going to try to talk about these topics. FHVs chasing too few trips is resulting in the loss of driver earnings. Okay, congestion tolling is still on hold, and then what I want to know is, and I really don't know this yet, and we'll discuss it, is whose side are we on? Do we want the congestion tolling, or do we, there are reasons for that, or do we not want the congestion tolling? Okay. F FHV driver pay rules, FHV interior advertising inside the car. Why are they allowing it for FHV people and not yellow taxis could do the same? Okay. Okay. Allowing FHVs to park in commercial spots to use the men's room. And there's nothing in the bill that they have up that says yellows can do it also. I guess we don't go to the bathroom. Okay. All right. We just let our bladder fill up until it bursts. Right. So we'll get to that. All right. Okay. Where am I? Okay, allowing FHVs, right. Allowing computer vans to pick up street hails, all encourage the oversupply. Okay. Um, is that right or wrong? I don't think it's right personally. Okay, American Transit, the largest taxi and FHV insurer, lost $700 million. How can this be? And if they go out of business, who are we going to use for insurance? And all new taxis have to be accessible until 50% of the cabs are accessible. All right. And once a medallion is taken from the car, it can only be placed on an accessible car. Okay, before the brokers that run some of the cabs could take a medallion off and put it on any kind of car, but not anymore. It's accessible. And that's it. Carolyn, it's up to you. What do you want to talk about first?
Okay, I guess we'll just go topic by topic, but let's see. Against a background of ever worsening quality of life in New York City, the solutions that are offered only prolong and worsen conditions. The standard operating procedure in this city seems to be that when policy fails, you double down on the failed policy. As an example, as Abe already mentioned, we know there's too many FHVs chasing too few trips, resulting in less driver earnings. Instead of allowing attrition, and there have been many opportunities where the TLC just could have let things go, and a lot of these cars would have disappeared, but they never allow that to happen. They do everything in their power to maintain the excess supply, whether it's driver pay rules, interior advertising, allowing FHVs to park in commercial spots, allowing commuter vans to pick up street hails, all encourage the oversupply. But what's coming next is even more impactful. New York State, to encourage electric vehicle purchases for FHVs, is considering legislation to create an entirely new authority, like the MTA or the Tri-Borough Bridge and Tunnel. They're calling it the Green Transition Authority. It was introduced by New York State Assembly member Jennifer Gonzalez Rojas and New York State Senator Julia Carmel Salazar in conjunction with New York City Council member Amanda Farias. The authority will be issuing tax-free, federally guaranteed municipal bonds. There will also be $1 per trip fee charged on every ride. And what's interesting is, coincidentally, having been relieved of any role in funding the mandated EV conversions of the FHV fleet, which we knew they were never going to be responsible for anything, Uber announced its intention to issue $4 billion in bonds. You can see how all this works seamlessly, and that is the Uber business model. So for all the people who kept saying for the last 10 years, but the business model doesn't work, well, this is the business model, that you just pawn off as much as you can onto the drivers, and when that doesn't work, it's on the taxpayers. And whatever rules need to be changed or authorities need to be created, that shall be done. It'll just be a red carpet all the way. Gentlemen, any opinions on this?
The opinion on the Uber's business model?
Well, they're going to have a whole new authority. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always against the answer to government is more government. I mean, I remember when I was running my fleet, there was, Easy Pass is a historically very difficult thing to deal with. And the answer how they solved that is instead of just making it easier to deal with Easy Pass, like, if you miss an $8 toll, like let's say the reader's not working, they would charge you a $100 violation fee. So instead of just, passing a law that would eliminate that, they created a new department called the Office of the Toll Payer Advocate. So the solution, instead of just making the violation less usurious, they're like, let's just add another position. I mean, I think increasingly, I was reading this somewhere that like government employees as a percentage of the economy is approaching maybe 40 or 50% of our economy is somehow tied, maybe even more, is somehow tied to government spending in a direct or partially indirect manner. So when, they make up that big of the budget or spending in the economy, the answer to, the solutions government's always going to provide usually is like, let's have more government, instead of like, have you ever heard of like a rule being removed? You only hear about laws being added or rules being added.
The bureaucracies ever get smaller? No, they only grow. I mean, the thing is, a lot of the problems that New York City faces with congestion and pollution and crashes and driver income all would have been solved if you just let the number of cars attrit organically. It would have probably happened. But instead, they pass all these rules and regulations which create more problems, like being locked out of the app for the Uber and the Lyft drivers because the utilization rate is too low. I mean, you just had to get rid of some of the cars, and that wouldn't have been an issue. So now they're always struggling to go to a new rule and the next step and make it even more complicated. But I think that's what they do.
Let me chime in here, okay? One of the biggest thing between the taxi cabs, the yellow taxi cabs, and Uber is taxi cabs are small businesses that are regulated by the government. Uber is a corporation that wants to get rid of the government and get rid of the yellow taxis so that they could be the Amazon of the traveling business. They want to maybe control the airplanes and anything under that. They just want to be and they just want to get rid of the TLC. I mean, we wanted to get rid of them, but there was no point to it. Over the years, everybody figured we're better off with them. Okay, but they want to do whatever they can to be the TLC for them and get rid of everybody else. I'm done.
Well, that's why they call it Uber. Think about it.
I know, but they have the power to do this. That's the thing, because if they're selling bonds, okay, then they're getting money to back them up. Okay.
Yeah, no, and they're actually supposedly profitable now. They were losing $1 billion a quarter. I think they say $1 billion a year. Do I have that right, Dawood? Have you kept up with the balance sheet?
I don't know the exact figures, but I always knew, because I know Uber pretty well. They were a profitable entity. I think it's almost like a utility. I think that's where it'll trend to.
Yes.
And those businesses, they trend to market share leaders. It's like, the way the businesses work is like it's a scale game. So whoever's the most scaled. And so for that matter, the story of Uber and Lyft is a perfect example where Uber's business model is working, But Lyft's business model is not working because they're not, one element of it is that they're not scaled enough, you know? So it's one of those things where like the business model works. It's like winner takes all kind of thing. So the business model works for the winner, but it doesn't work for the players that are not as scaled, you know, as Uber. In terms of like their view on regulations and stuff like that, I think there's a balance in looking at these things where I think it really comes back to the government. So for example, if you look back to the Medallion system, you could have viewed that like a medallion in a way was a city currency. You know, it was a very like, you know, the federal government can print US dollars. The city could print like taxi medallions and raise money from that. So the fact that the city doesn't have that ability anymore, it's almost like the city took away its ability to kind of print an asset. So it's sometimes it's counterintuitive that the city, like basically what I'm trying to get with is the longer I've been in this industry, I feel like is it corruption or is it incompetence? And the more I observe things, I think it's more incompetence than corruption. You know, where it's not like sometimes I think it's easy to say like, oh, there's a game going on. This person's trying to do this, that person's trying to do that. So a perfect example is like when they added the 10,000 EVs. Now, when I look back on that, we're approaching the almost 1 year anniversary of that. I'm like, okay, maybe there was a legitimate thing where they want to electrify the fleet or something. How in the world did they not? Very basic analysis would have dictated that, oh, if we add, you know, 10,000 cars, and then they're saying who could have, anybody could have predicted, we predicted it the day after, you know, either I don't understand fundamentally how they can't see that. So now what you have lockouts, you have all these different things. And for the lockouts, has the TLC once self-reflected and said, when we didn't add the 10,000 cars, there were no lockouts. When we added the 10,000 cars, 3 months later, there were lockouts. It's Uber's fault. So there's also an element, it's like the TLC needs to be run by people who understand the industry. And if you constantly have people who are learning on the job, and I think we have to be harsh about this because at the end of the day, this impacts people's livelihoods. Like everything is all, you know, right now it's about lockouts and everything, but like, you know, I think the lesson we learned from the medallion industry is it gets very serious when people start, you know, doing self-harm and things like that. It gets very, very serious. So they need to be, as policymakers, they need to do better. In a simple, just to be simple, like they need to be more competent. And if they're not competent, this is the last thing I'll say after, and I'll end this little like kind of quasi rant I'm going on, is that then they need to be removed. Like it has to be very quick. Like someone who's shown incompetence needs, like if I was the CEO of Uber, let's say, and you know, profits were down 2 quarters in a row, they would fire me. You know, that would be it. I think that's the good thing, at least about the free markets. In government, no one gets fired. By the way, in the Adams administration, the reason people are being removed right now is not because they're incompetent, it's because they've been basically corrupt, you know, so I feel like we need to get back to a place where bureaucrats or government officials, if they mess up, they should have a fear of losing their job. I don't think that's there right now.
That comes up every few years when you have an election. But in New York City, we don't really have elections. It doesn't really seem to be much of a choice, is what I'm trying to say. You know, in New York. And if anything, if Adams leaves or gets kicked out or goes to jail or who knows what's going to happen with him and his administration, you're probably going to get somebody to the left of Adams. And you're going to, well, depending on your view, you'll get even more extreme policies. So I don't really, although I see Joe Borelli, who's a Republican council member from Staten Island, or Staten Island, as people on the island call it. He's going to run for mayor, I think. He's part of a coalition of conservative Democrats in the city council and the few Republicans. I think there's about 10 or 11 of them against the 41 others. So, you know, even if somebody like that was elected, I don't really have much hope that they could actually do anything. You know, just somebody they call themselves the Common Sense Coalition, I think. But, okay. So are we done with topic
No,
one?
I just want to say one thing here. Another difference between Uber and the yellow taxi industry. Okay, I mean, very simply, what Uber wanted from the beginning and would like to have now is anybody who owns a car. I mean, how many million cars are there in New York City? Okay, that no matter that they all should be in a position to take a ride and give somebody a ride so Uber could make money off it and that you could make a little money off it. Okay, if you're a car owner. That was their dream. Okay, that and differently, yellow taxis, which are regulated, the number of cars are keep it down so that all the drivers can earn a living full time. So they're not. So Uber doesn't really want full-time drivers, but they're stuck with them. Okay, because their dream of having everybody in the world having an Uber car, it just doesn't make any sense to that could happen. Okay, we can go to the next one now. Okay.
All right, should we go on to the insurance problem with American Transit?
Yeah,
the
yeah.
largest taxi?
What are we going to do for insurance if American Transit goes out of business? There are very few companies that will insure taxi cabs or Uber cars or anybody.
Yeah,
You
I'd
know?
just like to mention something very odd in the numbers. So they lost, they say $700 million. I guess they had lots of accidents, lots of claims, huge settlements. I don't know what the reason is for the $700 million loss. But the odd thing about the numbers is that going back to December of 2018, there were about 1 million trips per day by all types of TLC licensed vehicles. 1 million trips a day. There were 5,000 TLC licensed vehicles involved in crashes in that month, December 2018. Then if we go to June 24, which is the latest numbers that TLC has on the website, there were 835,000 trips a day. So it's close to 1 million. But only 985 vehicles involved in crashes. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. And it certainly doesn't comport with an insurance company going out of business if there's that few cars involved in crashes. Something doesn't make sense. I think it has to do with the way the accidents are reported. If it's under a certain amount of money, like maybe $1,000, I think they just don't include it in the numbers anymore. Because you can't go from 5,000 to, I'm rounding, 1,000 with approximately, it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm sorry, I don't believe it's TLC.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of, we in a way, we kind of elevated the story and then Bloomberg picked it up. I spoke to Bloomberg and they ran with it. I think this, there's a few, so to start with the second point first. So because I run a fleet, you're absolutely right, Carolyn, you hit the nail on the head. So before, when you used to get into an accident, whether they used to make police reports. Now, unless it's a major accident or above $1,000, they make you file an MV-104. Like you have to like self-report. So I think that may have impacted like the number of police reports. So you actually, that's very good. Like a gut feeling. I think you're exactly right. In terms of I mean, this we can have a huge discussion about insurance, but I think the main issue with insurance is that what was happening is that the simplest way to think about it is like, by the way, American Transit has been effectively insolvent since like 1980, like perpetually every 5 or 6 years it's insolvent. And I think the reason why the very tricky thing about the NYC taxi insurance business is you only can charge a driver so much insurance, no matter what the needed prices. So a good example of this is, imagine you have like a house in Florida, right? And like, I don't know, like the sea level is rising near where it is. At a certain point in time, you can't insure that house. It becomes impossible. And so, and then you can, like, if the house is worth $200,000, but the insurance is $60,000, you run into this crazy dynamic where it's like, well, if we price the insurance, well, we need to price it at, no one can afford it. So what happens in NYC Taxi Insurance is basically what American Transit was doing, why it's insolvent, is that, let's say they underwrote $500 million in premium. In that year, they should have said, well, of the $500 million in premium, we believe 400 million will be in claims. And, claims are paid out over years. A claim is not paid out all at once. What they were doing effectively, or what is alleged basically in terms of how that arose, was they would say, you know what, of the 500 million of premium we collected in 2015, we think only 100 million will be in claims. Now, compound this year after year after year, the game catches up with you. That's the best way to explain that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and they probably need to raise premiums, right?
So, but if you 100%, but if you raise premiums, there's a limit to what a driver can afford to pay.
Right. But you know what? That would enable some attrition.
That's a very interesting point. Yes.
What if you charged very good drivers less and very bad drivers much more? Then those very bad drivers would go away, wouldn't they?
In practice, you're absolutely right. I think it would practically take like 5 years for that all to actuarially play out, basically. But yes,
okay.
Hypothetically,
now what are they?
Right.
Okay, what are they going to do instead? Instead, they want to expand, I believe, the van business. Like the dollar vans. You can't convince me that a dollar van is going to actually make money if the van is in good condition, it's inspected, fees are paid, it's properly insured. And is it Justin Brannon? No, he did the parking one. There's a bill, to allow commercial vans to pick up street hails. And the bill doesn't specify where this is to happen. So it's in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in Brooklyn where yellow taxis never go. What do you care? Well, you should care, because that can just be the beginning. There's nothing in the bill that says, well, that can never happen on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. It doesn't say that. So now you're going to have maybe a pool. I don't think it's going to work, because I don't think you can make that business work legitimately when they're only charging $2 a ride.
Well,
I just don't think there's a way to do it.
A few things about commuter vans. I looked at someone from the New York Times actually reached out to me about the commuter van industry after they saw an insurance article. My understanding from what happened, and maybe you guys have more insight into this, there's actually a big insurance problem. I think Park Insurance was the main insurer to the commuter van industry. And so what basically happened is I think they reduced the liability limits in the commuter van industry to make it more insurable. But there's actually only 25 commuter vans, like legal commuter vans. It's way down. I know. And then I looked it up. I said, well, who's insuring that? They managed to convince, or somehow all state related entity is doing commuter van insurance. But I think for the commuter van industry, in terms of the street hails, I conceptually agree with you that, okay, that could that's yet another loophole, but I don't, you just can't add TLC regulated. Isn't there a license cap on that effectively to add TLC regulated commuter?
There is. I was too lazy to look it up. I think it's a few hundred, but that could be changed too.
I mean, anything can be changed at the end of the day, but in terms of what it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, the fee on yellow taxis was 50 cents a ride for the MTA, and then they added another $2.50. So, I mean, the fee for wheelchair accessibility was 30 cents. Now it's $1. I mean, they can do anything they want, and probably will, even if it's irrational.
Listen, commuter vans work pretty well in the sections of Brooklyn and Queens, that are far out, such as maybe near Rockaway in Brooklyn on Flatbush Avenue, to come over the Marine Parkway Bridge, and you're trying to get to the subway. The nearest subway is at Flatbush and Nostrand. Okay, they work there, but I think to have these commuter vans in Manhattan, the ones that it would hurt the most is the MTA. Okay, and the buses. Okay, and maybe Uber is behind this also. Another way that they want to get rid of the buses. Okay,
I don't think the MTA cares, and half of the people who ride on buses don't pay anyway.
Well, they want to fix that also. Okay, it's madness. All right, I mean, I mean, I grew up taking buses and subways. Okay, and when I talked about that section of Brooklyn, that was very
But isn't, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the commuter van industry mostly for what they call quote unquote transit deserts, like within the outer portions of
yeah,
the outer
yeah,
boroughs, basically?
that's a transit that you know, there's a bus that goes from Neponset, you know, which is that part of Rockaway. I would call it East Rockaway, no, West Rockaway. Okay, where there are buses that go to Flatbush and Nostrand where the subway is. Okay, but there are people that live in between. They could get on the bus. I guess mainly I think the bus goes straight from Rockaway to Flatbush and
Like
Nostrand.
this is my,
Yeah,
and I'd like to get
yeah.
your reaction. My interpretation of what's happening in the commuter van industry is if they don't do this kind of thing, number one, it's a way to legalize the trips to collect tax and ensure, you know, there's that element to it. But it's basically, it's kind of like the green taxi industry. Right now, I think they're intervening in these industries because if they don't intervene, I think these industries are basically dead. Like how many green cab, like it's another example, like the green cab industry, a lot of people just forgot about it. Like it doesn't exist, but it's kind of dead, dying, kind of quasi, you know, like it's way,
Yeah.
way down.
There's like a few hundred of them left on the street.
Exactly.
That's
So
all.
a question I have for you is that wouldn't a green taxi be I guess of I guess a commuter van can do like more than 8 people to be fair, but wouldn't a green taxi also be solving for the same thing a commuter van is solving for? And they can do street hails in the outer
Yeah,
boroughs.
yeah, you're right.
So I think
I don't know,
I
I guess
basically
there's
yeah.
also political pressure, you know, to deal with a particular segment, you know, voting segment, I guess, you know, to try to legitimize this. I just don't think it'll work economically if everything is done by the book and licensed and inspected. And I can't imagine what the insurance is going to be when you got 10 street hails in your van.
How
You
much?
know, think about it.
How much is the bus fare now? 275. Okay, so they want to pick up people for $2. So if it's a straight bus ride, like going down Fifth Avenue or up First Avenue, down Second Avenue,
Yeah.
you know, they're saving 75 cents, and a lot of people will use it. Okay, they'll say,
You know, but I think
No.
the commuter van fares are paid for in cash. I mean, I don't think they're Venmoing the driver. You know, I'm sure it's like that. You probably stand in the street with $2 in your hand, and then the guy sees you when he stops. I'm just guessing. So it's probably all cash.
Is your concern, Carolyn, basically it's like, wait, what's going on? Like now you're giving street hail rights to commuter vans. Like,
yes,
is this a loophole type of thing?
Yes, it's just more chipping away, and it's always only the beginning when you see these things happening, and then it, you know, can just accelerate. Like congestion pricing in London, you know, it started out at one amount and in one area, and then it expands the area, and then they expand the amount of, you know, increase the amount of money. And then they turn around and say, gee, it didn't really work anyway. It didn't help with the congestion. Well, like bike lanes, you know.
Let's go to the congestion.
Let's talk about the foreclosures. There were 67 additional foreclosures last month of the Medallion loans. So there's now a total of approximately 3,200 since 2014.
But those medallions still exist. Okay, you know, they were foreclosed on because the people that owned them couldn't pay what they owed and didn't care. And
right.
Okay, but those medallions still exist.
A lot of them are foreclosed at 200,000, which tells me that's probably from the MRP program.
I think what those
now being foreclosed on.
I think what those foreclosures are basically is what they call credit bidding. So let's say the bank, whether it's PenFed or Marblegate or OSK, and it might be worth actually talking about that. There was a recent article by New York Focus on the lenders that didn't sign on to the MRP deal. And
yeah,
how
I was getting to that. I was getting to that.
So those foreclosure, what was happening, and this also relates to one of the other topics you guys mentioned in terms of the 50% weight, which is a massive deal, by the way, for the medallion market. Is that I think what was happening is Marblegate was actually, believe it or not, selling non-selected medallions they were taking control of the medallion and then immediately selling it, basically. I think it was just like, it says foreclosure, but I think that's effectively like a sale to potentially a new party in many instances. And they were selling with like maybe $10,000 or $20,000 down, my understanding, medallions for maybe as high as 210,000, 200,000, 190,000 kind of level of financing.
Okay, so you're saying that they didn't, when the person stopped making payments on this new negotiated amount of 170,000, that instead of going to the city and saying, "Hey, give me my 170,000 and we'll call it a day," instead they're going out into the market and selling them.
Yeah, and
Okay.
there's an act. I talked to a lot of medallion brokers. The medallions are selling. According, obviously, maybe they're lying to me, but you're seeing it in the numbers. Like the medallions in storage, all of that is going down. And just yesterday, I was talking to a yellow cab driver. I was riding with him, and he was like, "Yeah, I've been thinking about buying a medallion." So with lockout, there like also the flex fare is official now. So, for example, I was talking to a yellow cab driver yesterday. I said, "How many fares are coming from e-hails versus Yes, I know, very controversial term, e-hail, but he said 50% of my trips are coming from e-hails and 50% are coming from street hails. So there's kind of like this quiet thing going on in the yellow cab industry where Uber is beginning to dispatch to more yellow cabs, and like Curb is being used by more yellow cabs. So the amount of trips they have access to is going up, which is actually kind of controversial for the Uber industry because a lot of drivers said, "Hey, we're being locked out and yellow cabs are getting our trips." Believe it or not, that's actually a new thing now.
It's interesting. Of the 13,587 medallions, 9,200 are working. And getting to that article that you were talking about, not all medallion owners desiring reduction of principal and refinancing of their debt have been able to renegotiate their loans through the MRP, as not all the financial institutions have signed on. This was interesting in that article. NYTWA, Taxi Workers Alliance, says that there's an undisclosed investor willing to put up $60 million to refinance the debt. But I should point out that the MRP did absolutely nothing for the worth of the medallion franchise, nor the vast majority of medallion owners, especially those with little or no debt. But there we are.
You're saying that it didn't do anything for people who didn't have debt, essentially.
Correct.
It
Correct.
did in a way. This is the counter to that. And I like to get your reaction on the both sides of it, is that if you didn't have the MRP program, the whole industry would have collapsed, which therefore benefits even medallion, like the valuation would have just collapsed. So that has a benefit for someone who owns a medallion without debt because it supports a valuation, it supports a market. That's how another way.
If you wanted to sell it for cash, you'd probably get 85,000.
But imagine if the MRP didn't occur, then let's say you get 1,000 foreclosures, that would have tanked. I mean, I don't even want to imagine what that would have done to the market.
Yeah, but just on a practical day-to-day level, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I think there's a sense of being unfair. It's almost like it's like a student paying off their debt, and then they're like just paid off the debt, and then the guy who went to college 5 years later, like gets debt forgiveness, which I mean, I'm not saying sometimes you have to forgive debt for the sake of society. I'm not saying that, but there's this concept of like, hell, if I knew that the debt would be forgiven, I would have taken out the debt instead of paying it back. I think there's like a sense of it being unfair.
Right. Abe and I would have taken out huge loans and just, walked away from them.
That I can definitely understand. I would be personally I'd be happy for the people who got their debt forgiven, but there would be a little bit of like, okay, I was responsible, I didn't take out debt, all of this stuff, and I get a benefit from the medallion market being stabilized, but I don't get like, I would have taken out debt if I knew it was going to get forgiven. And then there's a lot of people are not talking about this, by the way, on the debt forgiveness. That's a taxable event.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
And so I actually spoke to a medallion owner about 3 months ago on this. And at first he said, "I don't own my medallion." Then I started talking. He's like, "Okay, wow, this guy knows a lot about this industry." And then he admitted to me, he's like, "Yes, I own a medallion. Like, you obviously know like a fair amount." I'm like, "So did you participate in the MRP Plus? And he said, yes. But he said, it's a headache because I have this big tax liability and I'm trying to figure out how to pay it, but I can't. So it's actually like, that's another angle of this story that, you know, I don't know how big or small it is, but
there was some legislation they were talking about at the federal level that they would do away with the taxability of the debt forgiveness, but I don't think that ever went anywhere.
it didn't go.
far as
Yeah,
I
it didn't
know.
go anywhere. So in reality, it's like debt forgiveness, but net of the taxes in reality, which could create a bit of a headache for those guys. But I'm actually quite, I mean, I know I've been positive on the Medallion market since, you know, I've been involved with you guys, or since I really started in the industry. I actually think if you game everything out with between the lockouts, between potentially congestion pricing preferences, between the e-hails being official or like electronic hails for yellow cabs being official, a lot of elements are there for the Medallion market to start going up. Also, I should mention, I'm writing an article, Marblegate's going to extend the deadline for it to list its Medallion related assets. But stuff is going on. I think something we should talk about, and you mentioned it, is the 50% waive.
Yes, that's what I'm getting to. The decision by Judge Daniels in the Taxis for All, which is a disability rights group, versus the TLC lawsuit on the wheelchair requirements. The settlement was made 10 years ago when Mirazoshi was counsel to the TLC, required 50% accessibility. So presently, 42% of active taxis, I think it's around 3,800, are accessible. The judge decided on 100% requirements on 13,587 taxis until 6,794 are accessible. This despite, and this never comes up, there's no demand for wheelchair accessible dispatch rides by passengers. There's 200 rides a day, which I'm going to take a guess that involves 100 people because they probably do round trip. So for 100 people, you're going to make almost 7,000 yellow taxis wheelchair accessible. Does this make any sense? But I don't think this even came up in the lawsuit. It's like taboo. You can't mention it, that there's no demand. I remember mentioning it to Mirazoshi years ago, and she said, oh, well, you'll see, you know, once there's more of them on the street, that will induce demand. Well, it didn't. It didn't induce demand. So why are we doing this? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Hey, Abe,
So
you wanna, what's your take on that?
Well, Carolyn is right about you know, the number needed for the accessible. Okay, but I think they just want, the judge doesn't understand all of that. Okay, and he just wants to look like a good guy that he's helping the disabled.
Right. Who aren't going to take the wheelchair accessible cabs.
Yeah, I mean, it should be appealed. Okay, you know, I mean,
let me play. They're
not appeal.
I know they're not. But what I'm going to say is they should somehow make a vehicle that's wanted by the people that have to use them. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you what else they changed in the rules. You know how they were allowing some guys, if the old cab that's not wheelchair accessible could be kept going for another year or two, if it could pass inspection, you know, they just let them keep it on the road. They're not going to allow that anymore.
I think this is the devil's advocate argument. I think what the judge basically said is that, well, in the year 2014, there was a lawsuit, 88, like whatever the details were, and it was already decided that 50% of yellow cabs have to be waived or wheelchair accessible. And why do you, TLC, think that my ruling, I think it's actually the same judge, if I'm not even mistaken. It was
it is. It
Greg
is the
Daniels.
same judge.
I think there's also another element, like, I already decided on this. And why do you think that you didn't need to follow my decision?
Because the industry is disappearing, and trying to make more yellow cabs wheelchair accessible is pushing on the proverbial string.
I think
like
that,
the harder you push, the more it's just all going to go away.
well, I think that's the key point where you have to layer on like, well, what happened? Like, let's reflect on like what happened since 2014 ruling. It's like, well, there was a thing like a Medallion crisis, like there's all these different things. I think for the disability advocates, obviously it's coming from a genuine place of passion, but they also have to understand that wheelchair accessible vehicles are very expensive. To Abe's point, there's only so many options. And, if you're going to force drivers to buy a $70,000 or $80,000 car, that's like some of them can't afford that. So then you could it's not their intention, but you could put them out of business, some of these guys. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So now there could be less cabs on the road because of it. And so you'll never get to 50% of 13,587 because you don't really have 13,587 taxis anymore.
I know we're always railing against the TLC. To TLC's to defend the TLC, they actually, I think, viewed it more along the lines of, guys, like there's also like, I think back in 2014 only 2% of yellow cabs are accessible, and so now it's like 32% of all issued and 42%, like you said, Carolyn. So it's like that's a major improvement. Then you have FHVs, like 6 or 7, whatever the number is. So I think to TLC's credit, I think they understood it, but the judge is the judge kind of thing. So I think it could be a little bit of a, like, I already decided on this case. Why do you think my previous ruling is no longer applicable to you?
Yeah, because of reality, which nobody is acknowledging, the reality of what's going on in the streets of New York. I mean, there was no discussion of that. And at the time when the TLC caved in on this, according to the ADA, taxis were exempt from having to be wheelchair accessible.
That's right.
And I remember, I think it was just, I don't know if it was the judge or the lawyer on the disability side said, well, no reason we can't go further than the ADA.
It's like electric vehicles with the FH. It's like, like New York has to be for, which I appreciate. I get it. It's like, I think he sent it like this is a Jackie Robinson moment for the, ADA. And obviously it's, if all yellow cabs can be accessible in a financially sustainable way, great. Like, I think everybody's for that. I think there's a financial aspect of this that people have to appreciate.
Listen, if they could make an accessible vehicle that's comfortable and cheap to, well, not cheap, but reasonable to maintain, nobody would care. I'd be very happy myself if I was a driver to have an accessible vehicle. I don't mind helping the disabled people. Okay, but I don't want to drive a vehicle that's uncomfortable to drive. Okay, which is the worst thing in the world, to be in a vehicle for 10 hours and being uncomfortable.
Abe, we never asked you this. What type of cars what was like the last 2 or 3 cars you drove?
The Ford hybrid vehicle was a very comfortable vehicle. Okay. I want to say something. They're making everybody buy these electric cars. Have you read an article, as I did, and seen a documentary? The Japanese are inventing cars that run on water. Okay.
Hydrogen. The issue with hydrogen is you need a fuel station, and
it
takes a lot to build.
It appears that it's successful, that they're able to do it.
I think for hydrogen technology, I think the technologies there, although hydrogen in California, if you want to look deeply into the hydrogen technology, they made a car called the Toyota Mirai, and then they actually built out like 20 or 30 stations in California. I think there was something that went on where hydrogen prices like spiked in this crazy way.
Yeah, but what the Japanese have done is make a vehicle where you don't have to put hydrogen in. You just put the water in and then they have equipment in the car that splits the hydrogen from the oxygen.
No, that's hydrogen. That's a hydrogen powered fuel cell. The main hold up with hydrogen to adopt hydrogen powered fuel cells is you effectively need like hydrogen gas stations. I don't think it's as simple as like you just have like a glass of water from your sink and like put it
You
in the
bring your
car.
hose out from your house and you fill it up with water, and the car itself turns gets the hydrogen.
Okay, I haven't
from water.
seen that would be
No,
incredible technology if that
I
existed.
posted on Twitter
Yeah.
the documentary that I watched. Okay. All right. It will take, you will fill the car with water, and it will disperse the oxygen and keep the hydrogen. Okay.
I don't
So you're
know
saying
enough.
we could
Yeah.
skip the whole EV part and just go right to the water.
I think
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
where I come
Exactly.
out with where I come out, and this might be a different. I'm very much for. It's kind of like what you're saying, Abe, with accessible vehicles. Like, if like when someone says like EVs are cheaper, EVs are this, EVs are that, it's like we are all like adults that understand things. Like, if EVs are cheaper, if they're better to maintain, if they're better with insurance, you don't need to hold a gun to someone's head and say, you buy an EV or I'm going to shoot you. People are logical and they will buy the electric vehicle if it's better. Now, you could say that, yes, we want to promote it, like it's chicken and the egg, you have to build a charging station. I think where it gets a little disgusting in my opinion is the politics of it, where it's not really about like, oh, we're big on EVs. It's like, ooh, there's like $5 billion at hand. Let's be all pro EV to get, hold of that money. And it's I think that like greenwashing, I think is the word that they use. But I think EV is great. I mean, I just think that they should leave it to a little bit more of the market, where if hydrogen is better, if that's a better technology, if EV is a better technology, the market will adopt it. They're holding a gun to everybody's head. And what's going to end up happening is someone's going to buy an EV, and then they're going to be like, we're talking about insurance. It is no insurance company wants to touch electric vehicles on the comp and collision side. It's so painful right now. So I don't know. I'm mixed feelings about mandates on these things. I understand why they have it, but I just think people will adopt. If EVs are cheaper, people will adopt it.
Right. I agree.
I want to fill my car with water from a hose. No, I'm serious. They're doing it in Japan. Okay. I posted the documentary on Twitter. Okay. And I said, you must read this. You must watch this.
Have you guys ever driven an electric car or ridden in an electric car?
I've driven a hybrid
No.
car. I've driven a hybrid car, which mainly runs on electricity. And it's very comfortable and quiet. Okay. But I've never driven an electric car, and I don't think I would want to buy one.
I think in like 5 or 10 years, it will be EVs will be it'll be the future, not because of a mandate. It'll be the future because it is the better option, if that makes sense. It's like people buy Toyota Camry hybrids now because it's better on gas. It's not because there's a mandate that you need to.
Well, if there's enough places to stop and get and charge your car in 10 minutes or 12 minutes, then then
Now I'll give you the city's argument. The city's argument is like, okay, guys, you're talking like, it's like, well, in order to build the charging infrastructure, we need to incentivize people, mandate people to buy EVs. So it's like a chicken and an egg problem. What do you say to that argument?
make me an EV that's easy to, that I don't have to go drive for 14 miles to get to the place to fill up the car, or be stuck on the highway somewhere, and the charge goes away, and the closest place is 20 miles away. Okay.
So your argument is that first
you would
build the
have to tow
charging
the car.
infrastructure.
You would have to tow the car. All right. I mean, it's not practical now. for everybody.
So your basic argument is like, okay, first build the charging infrastructure, then
Right.
I will adopt
Right,
it.
right. Give me enough charging stations that I don't have to worry about where I am and how much is left in the tank.
Carolyn, where do you come out on like on this whole mandating it or like thinking through that, like the government's
Well,
argument kind of?
have you noticed that there's many fewer gas stations in Manhattan? There's hardly any anymore in Manhattan. So that's another thing they could do. They could just take away the gas stations, and then you have to buy an EV.
Yeah,
Haven't you noticed that most of the major auto manufacturers are cutting back on EVs and production and research? Not in China, because I'm sure they're still very gung-ho in China on this. But, the other car companies, European and American, have been cutting back because they've been they lose money on all these cars. So how's that ever going to work? I just think we have so many other problems to deal with. I kind of think the whole EV thing, to me, it's not even an issue. I don't really care. Go to hybrids, hybrids are good.
Listen, I think we've all made our argument on this. Okay, I want to.
I think we're done.
I want to know. I want to know if congestion pricing, it's going to happen. Okay, it may one way or another they're going to make it happen. Do we want it or not want it?
Well, I'll say if the yellow taxi franchise had been maintained the way and protected the way it should have been, I probably, might even be for it, because then we'd have more trips. And they probably could have sold more taxi medallions to cover those trips, and, cab drivers would be happy with that. But that's not what happens. Instead you just, have 118,000 for hire vehicles on the street in New York City. And now you have this mess of a congestion pricing idea. It's just everything they do is bad. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Didn't really work in London. It's not going to work here. If you notice that even though Kathy Hochul postponed it, she didn't get any bump up in the polls having done that, because everybody knows it's just temporary and she's just doing it as, a reelection ploy. And, once she's past that hurdle, if she does get reelected, then they'll probably institute it. And of course, they talk like there is no congestion pricing, but there is, because yellow taxis and Ubers and Lyfts have been paying it all along, billions of dollars. What did the MTA do with that money? No matter how much money you give them, they always need more. Now it turns out they need much more for capital expenditures, having nothing to do with the congestion pricing or the lack of it. They're always going to need more money. It's just, somebody needs to do an audit, a forensic audit, top to bottom of the MTA. Sam Ansar, who used to be the controller for Crazy Eddie, who went, you know what, I'm not sure if he went to jail or not. I think he did go to jail for a while. He's a very smart guy, very good accountant. And he said, he wants to be controller, and he thinks there should be a forensic audit done of the Metropolitan Transit Authority. I couldn't agree more. And not just about the money, also about procedures. But that'll probably never happen.
I mean, I think Carol, I'm very aligned with what Carolyn just said. I think there's already congestion pricing for Uber and taxis.
Yeah, but this congestion on the streets, you can't move in that traffic.
I would approach it. This is the way. So I'm for congestion. I'm for the concept of congestion pricing to reduce traffic in core Manhattan, but I think there's an element of me, what Carolyn is saying is like, it feels like more of a money grab than it is like we're going to solve
It is
traffic.
a money grab. It is a money grab, but the question is, will it help or not help, the taxi cabs? Okay. There is
It'll help. I think yeah, it'll help.
But it may not help because many customers for the businesses in the city may not come anymore. Okay, there's all kinds of arguments about it. All right, but sure, I mean, you know, I used to love to work when the traffic was light because I could pick somebody up and do a $20 fare and in 15 minutes or something.
I mean, it's easy for I'll approach it this way. It's easy for obviously they did like 10,000 pages of studies with McKinsey and everything about coming up with a price. To me, just like as a simple man, a simple person, $15 just like conceptually seems like what? Like you're gonna charge because you also have like a toll on top. It just seems so high. I feel like the first iteration of congestion pricing to me feels like $5 should be. Yeah, I know I haven't done a McKinsey analysis on it, but $15 just
You know,
seems
there are
high.
people that drive into Manhattan, at least while I was there, every day, and would pay $50 to park their car and go to work. Okay.
But that's still there plus the $15 now if you
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter to them. They may be making $1,000 a day, these people.
But I don't like
Okay.
approaching things like that where like, well, they can afford because that's a form of taxation. Like, you know, it's like, okay, someone's wealthy, so they can, you know, because it's a very slippery slope because, you know, it's like not a good way to do policies. Like, can we extract more money from that guy? Like, how many pennies does he have in his pocket? Can we take 5 more?
Well, could we try doing the congestion pricing and see how it works out and give it 1 year and keep it or remove it?
Well, okay,
That'll never happen.
Going
I
back
know.
to how we started the discussion,
Yeah.
in the history of politics, at least recent politics, when you start one of these things, it's done. It's like, it's, you know, it's in cement.
Yeah.
Also, what they're not saying is that everyone is going to pay for this because the advocates say, well, it's only a few thousand rich people who are driving back and forth every day to go to work. Yeah, but what about the guy who drives in to clean your windows or fix your stove or your air conditioner or polish your floors? All those guys are going to be paying congestion fees, and that's going to be tacked on to your bill when you use their services. I mean, you might not see it, but it's going to be in there, so everybody is going to pay, not just, you know, a few people who drive in for work.
I
You know,
mean,
a lot
I
of the
do-
people who
yeah.
drive in for work, and nobody wants to admit this, I think are city employees. It's teachers, it's firefighters, it's cops. So they're probably going to wind up exempting all those people, which, you know, creates another problem. And who's left to pay for it?
When is the governor's race next election?
Is it 25?
Is the governor race every 6 years or every 4 years? I forget.
I don't know. I can't remember.
I know 25 is the mayor's way.
Right.
But in reality, the mayor's race is decided in the primary.
The mayor's election is always 1 year after the presidential election.
Right.
So the mayor's.
Well, that's it. Well, if we have an election, you know, there could be all kinds of conditions. We could be living under that. Maybe we won't even have an election, like World War III, or I don't know. All kinds of things could happen between now and November. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Next topic.
Well, because that affects congestion pricing, depending on whether you have Harris or you have Trump. It's probably going to affect whether we have congestion pricing in New York State or not.
All right, let's talk about the FHVs that are going to have permission to park in a commercial
in commercial spots. Okay,
Yeah.
That's a bill introduced by Justin Brannan.
Right,
Who's a city council member in like the Bay Ridge area.
and probably Uber got this thing to get going because their drivers are complaining they have nowhere to go to the bathroom. Something I was complaining for the entire 42.
Well, and they have no place to park. Why? Because there's too many vehicles. Because there's 118,000 vehicles. It always comes back to the same thing.
You know, I made a suggestion to the TLC. Okay, Alan Fromberg, I made it to him. He probably forgot about it a long time ago. He's retired. Okay, that we don't mind, you know, paying, you know, for a parking meter or whatever, as long as we could get to go to the bathroom. Okay, and I suggested that maybe every second block or every third block, that 1 meter was for taxis only. Okay, which I thought was a great idea, because I would have at the time put in 50 cents anywhere to find a place to go pee. Okay. And, you know, but so now they want to do this for FHVs and leave out the yellow taxis. Okay.
Correct. I asked Justin
know?
Brannon about that, and he explained it. He said, "Oh, you have your own special places to
Oh,
park."
we do,
taxis."
really, yeah.
Yeah, well, they're
I have my own special hiding places to do it. Okay. It's on the west side, okay? I mean, lots of streets on the west side, like, you know, with the, you know, there, I could tell 100 places where I would be, okay? Illegally, all right, over the years, because that was the only way I was able to stay in the business that long, okay? All right? I mean, I couldn't park my car, double park, you come out, you get $100 ticket or whatever it is, okay? I mean, that's insane, all right? I mean, or you know, you don't have that much trouble in the boroughs because there's McDonald's out there and other restaurants and things like that. But it's Manhattan, okay? It's Manhattan that, you know, there's not enough places. No, you don't know. You know, you have a taxi stand or you know, a relief stand. You don't know that you're going to be able to park there either, because there's maybe room for 1 or 2 taxis.
Is the
Hey.
issue that is the issue that you don't want FHVs to use commercial parking?
No, I want everybody to be able to use it, all vehicles, you know.
Oh, they're saying FHVs X yellow cabs?
Yeah,
correct. That's what I said. Yes.
yeah.
Oh.
And
yellow
Justin
cab.
Brannon, if you let me finish,
Finish.
explained it that we have taxi relief stands. Well, I could go around the city and take pictures with my cell phone of taxi relief stand and show you that there are FHVs parked in there are private cars parked in there are trucks parked in there are
That's
school
right.
buses parked in there, everything but taxis, because the TLC never bothers to enforce. And there's fewer of them, and they made many of them FHV and taxi areas to park, which used to be at one point, you know, exclusively for taxis. So it's just more chipping away of the franchise. I mean, by itself, maybe it's not that big of a deal, but along with everything else, it's part of this pattern.
I think one thing they should give yellow cabs the ability to be in bus lanes. I think
Yes,
there's
of course.
precedent for that in London. That could also
Yeah, and in
potentially help.
Paris, and
But you can't
one of the
park
Scandinavian countries.
You can't park in the bus lane, okay?
You can't. Well, you can make a rule that they can't pick up in a bus lane, but they can drive with a passenger in a bus lane.
Yeah, well, that we want too, okay? But we're talking about where can we park and go use a toilet.
I think their argument is they are increasing these stands and everything from historical precedent, but also a lot of the street space is also like bike lanes now, and so a lot of the street space is being taken up by. I think they're trying to like get cars out of the city more and more and more. Like on 10th Avenue right now, an entire lane is a bike lane now, basically. So I think there's like a big fight for space right now. But in terms of the bathroom issue, one issue is like, okay, do you have a place to park for the bathroom? A second issue is like, are there enough bathrooms to go to? What do you think the bigger issue is? Do you think there aren't enough bathrooms? Or it's more a parking issue.
Well, I think wheel cab drivers don't need bathrooms. Having lived with a cab driver for 40 years, there are other ways to deal with this problem, which I'm too discreet to describe.
Well, name a street in Manhattan, and I'll tell you where to pee.
You should just make a NYC Taxi news map, I think. Well, I think they...
No,
they're doing that. The city council is doing that already. They have like a list of bathrooms all over the place. And I think there's a bill that they want to have more public bathrooms. But again, even if you have more public bathrooms, there's, maybe no place to park. Right. Yeah.
Listen, I'll give you one. I'll give you one good spot to pee. Okay, where you have an option. All right, at least while in the years I was there, and that was on 36th Street, between between Second Avenue and First Avenue. On the left is the Midtown Tunnel. Okay, and you could pull over there and pee, and nobody would give a damn that you're doing that. All right. Across the street is a park where you can probably leave your car there and run into the park's bathroom, except I was reading the other day how filthy they are. Okay. All right. That's one. That's only one.
Abe's secret spot. He revealed
Yeah.
it.
Oh, I have about 20 to 30 secret spots.
Many memories, many memories.
In Manhattan, okay,
Yeah.
where no matter where I am and I'm desperate, I know where to go. But it took me years to figure all of that out. Okay, and it's too late to get a summons. Okay, you know something? I got a summons once. I was peeing on 11th Avenue, and I went and I fought it in court, and my argument was, tell me something, Your Honor. Why don't I have the same rights as a dog? Okay.
And what
That's
did
a
he
good
say
argument.
to you?
He said, well, that's a good argument. That'll be $75. He said,
Oh, okay. At least it wasn't indecent exposure or anything like that. It was just a 70
no, you're not.
fine. Okay.
I'm not gonna just stand on the middle of Fifth Avenue, whip it out and start peeing. But you find places where nobody's looking, except the camera somewhere is looking at you, right? I wave to the camera, hi, I've done that. Okay.
Dude, and my perception of it is I think they are trying to make it, but it is a tricky problem to solve, but I think they are, to be fair to them, I think they are, I've observed it because I walk a lot in Manhattan, is that they have made more taxi stands, they've made more FHVs to try to make a map.
Give the taxis or anybody, parking meters where it's 10 minutes only.
But they've even done one they'll argue they've even done one better. It's like free parking effectively just for taxis and FHVs.
Well, free, but
I don't think
they
they've
don't want to.
increased
They don't want to lose the money from the parking meters. So just make the parking meter where we pay you whatever $1, okay? And I don't know. It's this parking meters went up way more the last time I looked. Okay, but $1 you got 20 minutes. Okay,
But they'll say,
every third block. Every second block.
Oh, you're saying to, oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying to even make more stands, but to help convince them they can make money by charging people. You're saying they can even make more parking spaces.
Just make it a taxis, FHBs only. You got 15 minutes for $1 or $2. Okay, I would have loved that. I wouldn't have minded. In my day, it would have been 50 cents. Okay. Sure, 50 cents. There's a dining down the street. Okay. I mean, they have no idea what it's like until they experience it themselves. Okay. And maybe on their way to work, sometimes they have. All right. Oh my God. I gotta get to the toilet before I go in my pants. All right.
No, it is a major issue. It is
a major issue.
Yeah.
We're humans. We're not dogs. All right. The dogs can do it. Okay. You just have to pick it up scoop it up and then put it in a bag. All right.
We definitely don't need that dynamic going on in New York right now. We definitely don't need that right now.
Yeah. All right. So listen, where are we now?
We're over an hour. I think we should wrap this up.
Okay. This has been a very good, we didn't catch all the subjects, but we'll save that for the next one. And let's try to do this once a month, all right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm 100%.
Okay. So we'll talk about that, like a good time during the month, a certain date during the month. Okay.
Oh, I just noticed something. There was supposed to be a Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure hearing in the City Council on September 25th, and it says deferred next to the date now on the New York City Council website. They were going to have a hearing on a bill introduced by Shekhar Krishnan that electronically dispatched taxi trips have to pay at least the same amount as the meter, which I don't know if that's going to go anywhere and how that would affect like Uber trips. And they're also going to establish maximum rates for leasing, rental, lease to own, and conditional purchase for FHVs. And they were supposed to have a hearing on the commuter vans being able to accept hails from passengers in the street. And then they were also going to increase the number of violations required to revoke authorization to operate a commuter van service. So I think we see where this is going. Like trying to bend over backwards to get more commuter vans onto the streets. But I think this is being deferred. Funny, it says it in like very light print next to the date. So
Put it on Twitter if you get more information.
yeah, I already put it on Twitter, but I'll put that on Twitter too, that perhaps
Okay.
it's being, oh yeah, it says in red at the top, this meeting has been deferred. Well,
I think the
maybe-
next
I
big
guess-
meeting for just for like is the TLC public hearing on the waive requirements on the 10th. So maybe we
Yeah.
do a podcast on the back of. I feel like that meeting is potentially going to be pretty animated. I'll put it that way, potentially.
On the 10th of October.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So-
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for listening and tuning in. We now have video. Okay. Thank Dawood. Thank Carolyn. Next time maybe we'll get her a little picture of her, instead of a phone, if she allows us. Okay. Dawood.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Talk to
Bye-bye.
you later. Bye.
Bye.